The wind whipped around me as I trudged down the bustling city street, the cold seeping through my worn-out coat. My shift at the factory had been grueling as usual, and I was looking forward to the warmth of my small apartment. As I rounded the corner, I spotted her, a young girl, no more than 16, sitting against a brick wall. Her clothes were tattered, and she shivered uncontrollably in the freezing air. I hesitated for a moment, torn between my own worries and the obvious distress of the girl before me. But then my conscience took over. I couldn't just walk away. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, approaching her cautiously. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear and mistrust. "I'm fine," she mumbled, pulling her knees closer to her chest. "It's freezing out here," I said, glancing around. "Do you have anywhere to go?" She shook her head, and I noticed the redness of her hands and the tears on her cheeks. It was clear she had been out here for a while. "Look, I know it's none of my business, but you shouldn't be out here alone," I said, my heart aching for her. "Let me help you." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the $200 I had left. It was all I had until my next paycheck, but I couldn't leave her like this. "Here," I said, handing her the money. "Find a place to stay and get something to eat." She looked at the money, then back at me, tears welling up in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because it's the right thing to do," I replied, offering a small smile. "Everyone needs a little help sometimes." She took the money with trembling hands. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. "Take care of yourself," I said, turning to leave. The next morning, I arrived at the factory feeling a bit lighter despite the chill in the air. That feeling didn't last long. As soon as I clocked in, my supervisor called me into his office. Thomas Blackwell was a stern, no-nonsense kind of man, always dressed in a suit that seemed far too expensive for his position. "Andrew, we need to talk," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Sure, Mr. Blackwell," I replied, trying to keep the nervousness out of my voice. "What's this about?" He leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold and calculating. "I've heard some disturbing reports about you. It seems you've been associating with undesirable elements." My heart skipped a beat. "I don't understand," I said, genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" He sighed, as if I were a child who needed something explained for the 100th time. "The mafia, Andrew. There's talk that you're involved with the mafia." I blinked, stunned. "What? That's ridiculous. I helped a girl who needed money last night, that's all." Mr. Blackwell's expression didn't change. "Regardless of your intentions, we can't have that kind of reputation here. You're fired. Pack your things and leave immediately." I stared at him, trying to process his words. "Fired? But I haven't done anything wrong." "We can't afford to take chances," he said, standing up and walking to the door, clearly signaling the end of the conversation. "Pack your things, Andrew. Now." Feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under me, I left his office. My colleagues watched in stunned silence as I packed up my belongings. They knew me well enough to know I wasn't involved with any criminal activities, but no one dared to speak up. The fear of losing their own jobs kept them silent. As I walked out of the factory for the last time, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal and injustice. All I had done was help someone in need, and now I was paying the price. "Andrew, wait." I heard a voice behind me. It was Michael, one of my closest friends at the factory. "Hey, Michael," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm so sorry, man," he said, looking genuinely upset. "This isn't right. You don't deserve this." "Thanks, but there's nothing we can do," I replied, shrugging. "I just hope the girl is okay." Michael nodded, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "You're a good guy, Andrew. Don't let this get you down. Something better will come along." "I hope you're right," I said, forcing a smile. "Take care, Michael." The following days were tough. With no job and my savings dwindling, I was starting to lose hope. I spent my days job hunting and my nights wondering if I had made a terrible mistake by giving away my last $200. As I sat in my small apartment, staring at my phone, my thoughts constantly drifted back to the girl I had helped. Who was she? What was her story? One evening, just as I was about to give up on the day's job applications, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find a man in a sleek black suit standing there. He had an air of authority and a presence that made it clear he wasn't someone to be trifled with. "Andrew Brown?" he asked, his voice firm but polite. "Yes, that's me," I replied, my heart pounding. "Can I help you?" The man gave a slight nod. "My name is Victor Russo. I believe you helped my daughter a few days ago." I was taken aback. "Your daughter?" "Yes, her name is Isabella. She told me about a kind man who gave her money and ensured she had a safe place to stay for the night." His expression softened slightly. "That man was you, correct?" "Yes," I said, still processing the situation. "Is she okay? I've been worried about her." Victor smiled faintly. "She is fine, thanks to you. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did." "There's no need to thank me," I said, feeling a bit awkward. "Anyone would have done the same." Victor's smile widened slightly. "I'm not so sure about that. May I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside to let him in. He walked in with the confidence of someone who was used to being in control. As we sat down, I couldn't help but notice the contrast between his expensive suit and my humble living conditions. "I think there are some things you need to know about Isabella and our situation," Victor began. "Her mother and I divorced several years ago. After the divorce, her mother remarried a man named Thomas Blackwell." I sat up straighter, surprised. "Thomas Blackwell? He's the reason I lost my job. Mr. Blackwell accused me of having connections with the mafia." Victor's expression darkened. "I see. That's partly true. I am involved with certain organizations, but I assure you, I had no part in your dismissal. Thomas is a despicable man who mistreated Isabella after her mother passed away. She endured a lot of suffering at his hands." "I'm so sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely troubled. "No one deserves to go through something like that." Victor nodded. "That night you found her, she had run away. She was trying to find me, but she didn't know how. Thanks to you, she was safe until I could locate her." "I'm glad she's all right," I said, relieved. "But why are you telling me all this?" Victor leaned forward, his eyes piercing into mine. "Because you need to understand the full scope of the situation. Isabella is not just any girl. She's my daughter, and I will do anything to protect her. Thomas Blackwell will pay for what he has done, but it will be done legally. I want you to know that your act of kindness has not gone unnoticed. You have my gratitude, and I want to offer you my help in return." I was stunned. "Help? What kind of help?" Victor smiled. "First, let's get you a proper meal. You deserve that much at least. Then we'll talk about your future." Before I could protest, Victor stood up and gestured for me to follow him. We left my apartment and got into a sleek black car waiting outside. We arrived at an upscale restaurant, far more luxurious than anywhere I had ever been. The host greeted Victor with a respectful nod and led us to a private room. As we sat down, I felt out of place, but Victor's calm demeanor put me at ease. "Order whatever you like," Victor said, handing me a menu. "Tonight is on me." "Thank you," I said, still trying to wrap my head around everything. The door opened again, and Isabella walked in. She looked much better than the last time I'd seen her. She was dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit, and there was a brightness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Isabella," I said, standing up in surprise. "It's so good to see you. How are you?" She smiled warmly. "I'm much better, thanks to you. I don't know how to thank you for what you did." "There's no need to thank me," I said, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I just did what anyone would have done." Victor nodded approvingly. "Andrew, you did more than most people would have. You showed kindness when it was needed most. For that, we are deeply grateful." As the evening progressed, the conversation turned lighter. We shared stories and laughed over the delicious meal. The days following my dinner with Victor and Isabella were a whirlwind. One afternoon, I received a call from Victor. "Andrew, could you come to my office this evening? There's something important I need to discuss with you." "Of course, Mr. Russo," I replied. "I'll be there." He gave me the address, and I recognized it as a building in a respectable part of town. As I made my way there, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and nervousness. This meeting felt like the beginning of a new chapter in my life. When I arrived, I was greeted by a receptionist who led me to Victor's office. It was a spacious room with large windows overlooking the city, furnished with modern, stylish decor. Victor was seated behind a sleek desk, and he stood up as I entered. "Andrew, glad you could make it," he said, shaking my hand warmly. "Please have a seat." I sat down, feeling a bit out of place in such an elegant office. Victor leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "Andrew, I want to talk to you about your future," he began. "I know losing your job at the factory was a blow, but sometimes life closes one door to open another." "I appreciate that, Mr. Russo," I said, nodding, "and I'm grateful for your help, but I still don't understand what you need from me." Victor smiled. "Fair enough. Let me explain. I'm in the process of setting up a new company. Our goal is to legally take over the factory and remove Thomas Blackwell from his position. We need people who are trustworthy, hardworking, and committed to justice. You fit that description perfectly." I was taken aback. "You want me to work for you?" "Yes," Victor replied, "but it's more than just a job. This is an opportunity to make a real difference. You've already shown your character by helping Isabella. Now, I want to offer you a chance to be part of something bigger." I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. "I'm honored, Mr. Russo, but are you sure I'm the right person for this? I don't have any special skills or qualifications." Victor leaned back, his gaze steady. "What you have, Andrew, is integrity and a good heart. Skills can be taught, but character is something you either have or you don't. I believe in you." At that moment, Isabella walked into the office, her smile lighting up the room. "Hi, Andrew," she said, coming over to sit next to me. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Victor said, gesturing for her to join us. "In fact, Isabella can explain a bit more about what we're planning." Isabella nodded. "Andrew, my father has been working hard to gather evidence against Thomas. We need someone on the inside who understands the factory operations and can help us build our case. You know the workers, the processes, and the problems. You can provide insights that no one else can." "I see," I said, feeling a sense of responsibility. "And what exactly would my role be?" "You would be helping us with the transition once we take over," Victor explained. "We want to ensure a smooth change in management and make sure the employees are taken care of. You'd be our liaison, the bridge between the old regime and the new." I nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I want to help. Thomas needs to be held accountable for what he's done." "Excellent," Victor said, smiling. "I knew you'd say that." There was a knock on the door, and a man in a business suit entered, carrying a folder. "Mr. Russo, here are the documents you requested." "Thank you, Robert," Victor said, taking the folder and handing it to me. "These are the preliminary plans and some background information on the new company. Take your time to review them." I opened the folder and started skimming through the documents. They were detailed and well organized, outlining the steps for the takeover and the restructuring of the factory. It was clear that Victor and his team had put a lot of thought into this plan. Isabella leaned in, her voice soft. "Andrew, we're in this together. My father and I trust you. We know you can help make this right." I looked at her and then at Victor. Their confidence in me was both humbling and empowering. "All right," I said, closing the folder. "I'm in. Let's do this." Victor stood up and extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Andrew. We're going to change things for the better." As I shook his hand, I felt a surge of determination. As I left Victor's office that evening, the city lights seemed brighter, the air felt fresher, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the future. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Victor's plan to take over the factory was meticulous, and every detail needed to be executed perfectly. I found myself in meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and other members of Victor's team, all working toward the same goal: removing Thomas Blackwell from power and restoring integrity to the factory. My role as liaison between the workers and the new management was crucial. I spent hours talking to my former colleagues, assuring them that the changes would be for the better and that their jobs were secure. The workers, who had long suffered under Thomas' harsh management, were cautiously optimistic but supportive. One day, Victor called me into his office. "Andrew, we're ready to move forward with the final step," he said, his eyes sharp with determination. "We've gathered enough evidence to expose Thomas's corruption and secure the takeover. Tomorrow, we'll confront him and finalize the transition." "How do you plan to do it?" I asked, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. "We'll present him with the evidence of his misconduct and offer him a choice: resign quietly and avoid legal consequences, or face a public scandal and possible jail time," Victor explained. Given his ego and desire to maintain some semblance of dignity, I expect he'll choose the former. The next morning, we assembled in a conference room at the factory. Victor, Isabella, a few key members of our team, and I waited as Thomas was summoned. When he entered the room, he looked surprised and wary, clearly sensing that something was amiss. "What's going on here?" Thomas demanded, his eyes narrowing as he took in the serious expressions around the table. "Please have a seat, Mr. Blackwell," Victor said calmly, gesturing to a chair across from him. Thomas reluctantly sat down, his posture rigid with tension. "I'm not sure what this is about, but I don't have time for games." "This is no game, Mr. Blackwell," Victor replied, sliding a thick folder across the table. "This folder contains evidence of your numerous violations and unethical practices while managing this factory. Misappropriation of funds, mistreatment of employees, and falsifying records are just the beginning." Thomas's face paled as he opened the folder and skimmed through the contents. This is preposterous. You have no right." "We have every right," Victor interrupted, his voice firm. "As of today, Rilke Enterprises has acquired controlling interest in this factory. You are no longer in charge." Thomas' eyes darted around the room, looking for support, but finding none. "You can't do this. I've built this place up from nothing." "You've built it on the backs of hardworking people whom you've mistreated and exploited," Isabella said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "including your own stepdaughter." Thomas' eyes flicked to Isabella, and for a moment, something like regret flashed in his expression. "Isabella, Save it," she said coldly. "Your actions have consequences, Thomas. It's time you face them." Victor leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "You have two options: resign quietly and leave with what little dignity you have left, or we make this public. The choice is yours." Thomas looked down at the evidence again, his hands shaking. After a long moment, he sighed heavily and slumped back in his chair. "Fine, I'll resign," he muttered, defeated. Victor nodded. "Wise choice. You'll sign the necessary documents before you leave." As Thomas was escorted out of the room to finalize his resignation, a palpable sense of relief washed over the room. It was done. The corrupt manager was finally gone. That evening, Victor, Isabella, and I gathered at a nearby bar to celebrate. The atmosphere was light, filled with laughter and camaraderie. It felt good to be among friends, to share in the victory we had worked so hard to achieve. "I still can't believe it," I said, raising my glass. "Thomas is finally out." "Believe it," Victor replied, clinking his glass with mine. "And it's thanks to you, Andrew. Your dedication and integrity made this possible." "I couldn't have done it without all of you," I said, smiling at Isabella. "Especially you, Isabella. Your strength and courage are truly inspiring." She blushed slightly, but her eyes shone with gratitude. "Thank you, Andrew. I couldn't have faced this without knowing I had such amazing people by my side." As we toasted to new beginnings, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. We had not only brought down a corrupt manager, but also paved the way for a better future for everyone at the factory. It was a testament to what could be achieved when people stood together against injustice. Victor leaned in, a mischievous glint in his eye. "So, Andrew, are you ready for your new role in the company?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Bring it on. I'm ready for whatever comes next." And with that, we continued to celebrate, knowing that we had made a real difference and looking forward to the bright future that lay ahead.